Pakistan,
India,
Japan,
United Kingdom,
Serbia,
Voss,
Switzerland.
So.
Kommunen und Unternehmen des Mittelstands. Beide haben sie eine wirklich tragende Rolle
Municipalities
in der
and
Umsetzung der
small and
Energiewende.
medium-sized
Beide
enterprises
gestalten sie die
both have
Transformation
a
vor
very
Ort.
important role in the
Und
energy
dabei verbindet sie auch
transition.
wahnsinnig
Both
viel.
shape the
70%
transformation
der
on site.
Klimagesetzgebung aus
70%
Europa
of the
trifft direkt
climate
Kommunen oder Stadtwerke. Und die müssen dann zusehen, dass
legislation
sie
in
das vor Ort
Europe
umsetzen.
has a direct impact
Das
on
deckt
the
sich auch mit den
municipalities, and they
Herausforderungen des
have to
Mittelstands.
implement it.
Stichworte
And
sind
this
da die
is also
Umsetzung von
true for the small and
Energieeffizienzmaßnahmen
medium-sized
und
enterprises.
Energieeffizienz.
They are
Letztes Jahr haben
responsible
wir an
for
dieser Stelle über die Finanzierung der Energiewende in den
implementing
Kommunen
the
gesprochen.
different
Ein
rules.
Aspekt wurde dabei ganz besonders
Last year, we
betont.
talked
Ohne
about the heat
Kooperation gelingt
transition
die
for
kommunale
the
Energiewende nicht.
municipalities, and it was said
Dementsprechend
very
steht das
clearly
Thema
that
also
without
heute
cooperation,
im
it's not
Fokus.
possible to
Wie
um,
können
do it
Kommunen und
properly.
Mittelstand
This
in der
is the
Energiewende an einen
focus
Tisch
of our
kommen?
topic
Und wie können sie ihre
today.
Interessen
How
verbinden?
can we bring the different
Und dann,
partners
welche
together, and how can they
Rahmenbedingungen braucht
bundle
es
their
überhaupt,
forces?
damit
And
diese
what type of framework
Kommunikation
conditions
und
are
Zusammenarbeit
required in
funktioniert?
order to have
Ihre
a
Anwesenheit bei
successful
heutigen E-World
cooperation?
Kickoff zeigt,
That you are
wie
here
wichtig
for the eWorld
der
kickoff
Austausch rund um
today
dieses Thema
shows
ist.
that it's very important to
Danke, dass
have
Sie da sind
an
und ganz
exchange
herzlich
about this
willkommen zum
topic.
eWorld
Thank you
Kickoff.
for being here, and a
Mein
very
Name
warm
ist Anne
welcome
Boos. Ich
for the
leite den Programmbereich
eWorld
für eWorld und
kickoff.
freue
My
mich sehr,
name
dass
is
wir die
Anne
nächsten
Boers.
etwa
I'm
2 Stunden
heading the
miteinander verbringen.
conference department
Allow
of
me to
kickoff, and I'm
briefly
looking
switch into
forward to the
English
next
to
2
welcome our
hours.
European audience. Your presence at this final day of the eWorld Kickoff shows how many questions need to be discussed when it comes to cooperation between municipalities and SMEs. Thank you for attending this day of the eWorld Kickoff, and welcome to the opening conference for the eWorld season. My name is Anne Boers. I am heading the eWorld conference team, and I am very much looking forward to spending the next about 2 hours with you. We have prepared an English and a German live stream for you, so please feel free whichever is best for you to watch. I'm also very sorry for the little delay in starting today's conference. There has been a little hiccup with the streams, but now everything's in order and should be all right. Auch zur Sicherheit noch einmal auf Deutsch. Wir haben einen
And
Stream
now
auf Deutsch und
in
einen
German
auf
again,
Englisch
we've got a
für Sie
stream
vorbereitet,
in
sodass Sie gerne
English and
jederzeit
another
das
stream
pausen
in
können, wenn es für
German,
Sie
so
am
that you
besten
can
passt.
choose
Die
your
Links
preferred
finden Sie in
language.
den Agenden.
You will find the
An der
links
Stelle noch
in
eine
the
kurze
agenda. And
Entschuldigung.
at this point, I also
Wir
would
hatten
like to
leider vorab einen
apologize
kleinen
for the
technischen
brief delay.
Schluckauf
We
für
had
den
a
Start der
technical
Livestreams. Jetzt
hiccup
ist aber alles in
regarding
Ordnung.
the start of the live streams, but
Etwas
now
zurücklehnen
everything is all
und ins
right
Programm
and you
gehen.
can relax and enjoy the program.
Apropos Programm, was haben wir denn überhaupt
And
vor
program,
heute?
well,
Was
what are
steht
we
denn so
going
im
to do
Programm?
today? What
Das
is
eWorld
on
Kickoff
our
ist
agenda
eine
for
dreitägige
today? The
Veranstaltung,
eWorld
genauso
Kickoff
wie die
is a
Präsenz letztes
3-day
Mal auch.
event
Bisher ging
similar
es um
to
zwei
the fair
andere
in
wichtige
February.
Bestandteile oder
So far, we have
Prüfungspunkte
discussed
für die
2 other
Energiewende. Einmal
important
das
topics for
europäische
the
Stromnetz
energy
und
transition.
dann
First of all, we were
der
talking about
Erdgasmarkt.
the
Sie sehen
European
hier auch nochmal die
electricity grid.
Überschrift mit
On
der
Wednesday, we talked
Tagesserie.
about the
Alle 3
natural gas
Tagesserien.
market. And here you can see
Gestern
the
haben wir über die
titles
Rolle von
of the
Erdgas in der europäischen
presentations in the past
Energiewende
3
diskutiert.
days. Yesterday, we talked
Erdgas
about
wird,
the
da waren sich die
importance of
Wissenschaftler doch
natural
ziemlich
gas for the
einig, noch bis
European
Anfang der
energy transition, and the
2050er Jahre
experts
eine Rolle
agreed that
spielen.
natural gas
Für die
will
Versorgung
definitely
des
play a
Landes.
role up until the
Auch für die
2040s.
Wettbewerbsfähigkeit Europas
And
wird
also for
Erdgas
the
ein zentraler, aber
competitiveness
auch nicht
of
der einzige
Europe,
Pfeiler sein.
natural gas
Welche
will
anderen
be
Pfeiler da
one
noch
pillar,
diskutiert wurden,
not
da
the
kann
only
ich
one.
gerne
The other
auf die
pillars that
Aufzeichnung
were
verweisen, die
discussed,
Sie noch
you
finden
can
können.
see in the recordings that you'll find on the community page. On Tuesday, we talked about the challenges for the European electricity grid operators, and people said we really have to think European and we should not so much focus on the national legislations. This is the key in order not to put up obstacles for each other. And this recording can also be seen in the community and also in YouTube. Today, and now I'd like to change the charts. Today we will talk about the potential of good cooperation between the municipalities and small and medium-sized enterprises. We'll first have a kickoff presentation by the Danish embassy, and then we will have a panel discussion with a deep dive into the topic. Around 12 o'clock, we will close the program and you will know how to best prepare for cooperation between municipalities, utilities, and small and medium-sized enterprises. Another technical comment, you can always ask questions using the tool that you can reach via the link or via the QR code, and I will then hand on your questions to the guests, to the panel. The YouTube stream that you are seeing right now will also be available later on, and if you think it is useful, then you can share this with your community. So let's get started with today's program. To bring partners together for the energy transition is not always an easy task, and I think it's very inspiring to see examples where such a cooperation has been successful already. Our first guest will explain how players in the Danish city of Aarhus are working together in order to promote the energy transition. Climate partnerships, this is a buzzword, and what this is and what this also means for the heat plans will be shared by the energy policy advisor of the Danish embassy in Berlin, Johann Maximilian Voss. It's great to have you here. Yes, good morning. Thank you very much, Anne, that we can be here today. For around 3 years, you have been the energy policy advisor at the Danish embassy. Perhaps you can give us some information on what you are doing every day. What are the topics that are important for you right now? We are, of course, especially interested in the energy transition topics that are important for Denmark. I am focusing on energy or heat transition and heat efficiency. So this means I'm responsible for partnerships between the German and Danish authorities, and we've got partnerships with 3 different federal states, Hesse, Baden-Württemberg, and North Rhine-Westphalia. And we have good cooperation regarding heat transition, heat efficiency, and the municipalities are, of course, important players and are always in there. Yes, this is a wonderful transition to your presentation. I'm looking forward to your presentation and I will share your charts. Yes, very good morning to all of you, and I best welcome from Berlin. I brought you some information for the municipal energy transition in Denmark. I would like to tell you about some of the learnings from Denmark, which might also be applicable in Germany for the heat transition. Before I get started with my presentation, let me say that it is obvious many of you might have been in Denmark already, and Denmark is a small country compared to Germany, perhaps with smaller challenges, but nevertheless, my message today is to show that the municipal heat transformation can work, and even if it is in a smaller dimension for Denmark, but it's still the same challenges and the same problems to be solved. In the next chart, you can see that we are currently having the Danish presidency of the Council of the European Union, and this gives you the opportunity to set some focus points. And here we want to talk about competitivity, but I also would like to talk about energy independence. Here, Denmark at present is focusing on reducing the dependence from Russian gas and to start an EU strategy so that we will be completely independent of Russian gas imports in the future, because still we have a certain dependency. And this is a big topic also for municipalities and for utilities, because gas is playing a major role for heat supply, especially in Germany. And on the next chart, I would like to talk about the bigger picture. You know many of these climate targets, but I wanted to show it to you nevertheless, because it's no longer certain today that all these goals will be kept up. Denmark wants to have 100% green electricity by the year 2030. They also want to reduce greenhouse gases, and we are on a good path there. And climate neutrality is to be achieved in 2045, and until 2050, there is the huge goal by the European Union that Denmark is supporting and on a good path to have the big greenhouse gas reductions. Let's move on to the next chart, and here we can see what I'm going to focus on today. I will mainly talk about district heating in Denmark, because district heating is a major key for the municipal energy transition in Denmark. Now we are seeing many small dots on the map, and these are all the different networks that we have. You don't have to know too much about the country to imagine that this also means these are smaller municipalities involved here. We don't have so many big cities. We've got 379 networks across the country. 70% of the Danish households are connected to district heating. And this is a development which started in the 1970s when we had the oil crisis. Now we had the gas crisis, which again gave us a little push in this direction. In 2023 and 2024, we saw 40,000 new customers for district heating in each year. So we can see that district heating is further developing, and in Denmark, it's the major key for municipal energy transition. On the next chart, you can see one explanation why this has become such an important key for the municipalities. And in the graph, you can see that district heating has become greener and greener in the Danish system. And this is an important part for the municipalities and for the utilities, that district heating supply step by step became greener.
So every municipality can choose their own individual pace and solutions and shape the concept they want to apply in order to render their systems greener. And we will see more on the next page, and with the help of this diagram, an outlook until about 2035. And you can see how this is supposed to change the whole landscape of the fuels that are used. At the moment, we have a lot of oil still. Over the next 10 years, fossil fuels are to be reduced until a complete phase out of coal and gas. The share of biomass is also supposed to go down, and we want to really go for renewable technologies. Waste heats, heat pumps, geothermal plants, electric boilers. All this has the target of not just protecting the climate, but also rendering the price of heat attractive for consumers. And this attractive price is something that everybody really expects, and that the Danish district heating networks actually offer. And we see on the next page an overview of all the individual scenarios. Basically, what is true is that the higher the number of sources of energy for a heating network, the more flexibility and attractiveness you have. We have seen this during the gas crisis. It all depends also on the availability of fuels and future availability of resources. And the more renewable sources we have, the more we transpose the value creation away from fossil imports, and we invest more into plants at the local level. And the third point I'm making on this page is what I think is most important for many representatives from public utilities and municipalities, in particular in Germany. The consumers themselves don't really feel the energy transition in district heating, because at their homes they have permanently heat coming from the network, and they don't really feel the difference from the original source. But that means that this should be one of our targets as well, to go step by step and go over to green resources without really impacting the customers. And I would now like to go into further details using some of the salient points, which I'm sure you are familiar with, that belong with sustainable heat planning. And the first thing here is a data center on the island of Funen in Denmark. And this delivers waste heat, excess heat to the local heating network. I think the German DNA, the agency, also analyzes data in order to evaluate the German potential. And there is high temperature potential from industrial facilities where you have high temperatures, for instance, because of manufacturing processes that can quite easily be translated to heating networks. On top of that, you have low temperature potentials like from data centers, and there are creative solutions for actually tapping heat sources using heat pumps and then increasing the temperature to the needed degree. In our experience, evaluating such potentials is always worthwhile. You look at potential sources of waste and excess heat, you look at potential temperatures, you do the numbers, and in Germany there is a surprisingly high number of potential sources of high temperature waste heat. So this hasn't been tapped yet. And on the next page, you see another very important element, that is storage solutions. Storage is discussed quite a lot nowadays, in particular battery storage. And when you look at district heating networks resilience and the economic efficiency of such networks operations, you see that thermal storage solutions play a big role. That is at least the case in Denmark. One effect of these solutions is that the public utilities or the heat providers can buy electricity at attractive prices when there is a high availability. We have flexible pricing in Denmark, so you have good prices, favorable prices for heat generation. And there is another aspect of this, of the storage solutions. It's more a system-relevant school of thought, really, when you want to base your heating on renewable energy sources. You have to think more and more about controlling capacities and reacting to times of low energy availability. And then, of course, storage solutions play a big role because you can still consume electricity when there is a lot, and then you have storage to bridge times when there is only little. So that is the overall scenario of the energy transition that has to be taken into account. And I think that storage solutions can also play a big role in Germany in order to increase flexibility of municipal utilities. And on the next page, a brief intro of what is also part of the traditional concept here. Energy efficiency means, traditionally speaking, of course, to save energy. And this has happened a lot. Denmark has done it, and the European Union has set up targets. And that is true for new buildings in Germany as much as in Denmark. You have individual cases where you see that the energy saving scenario has to be integrated with an optimized, let's say, an optimized approach to utilization of energy. And this can, of course, be done best with digitized technologies, with smart meters, digital meters in the buildings, in the individual rooms. This can help a lot with saving energy, thanks to knowledge of when you need how much energy, how many people are in which room. Or I only heard of an example recently from Danish colleagues who conduct such analyses. They said in schools, the heat planning is usually not adjusted to the vacation times. So this is often a case of low-hanging fruit. It's easily achievable results if you keep in mind that schools are usually not used during the holidays. So let me show it again with the help of this next graph. If you use data in order to analyze energy consumption, 10 to 15% of consumption can easily be saved by simply being clever about how you use and apply the solutions. And if you look at the energy consumption within a specific building in concrete terms, you can also make decisions in a more targeted manner, because you can then decide which part of a building is really worth investing into and where solutions can actually increase efficiency. And altogether, your decision making can be more effective if you have data available. And last but not least, suppliers of heating on the local level can be more accurate. They can calculate accurately which temperature is actually needed so that not excessive energy is put into the networks. Going further, I'll briefly speak about the Danish city of Aarhus, or Aarhus, as it's pronounced in Germany. It's the second biggest city in Denmark. Maybe you have been there. It's really worth a visit. 400,000 people approximately live in Aarhus, and Aarhus does have a net zero plan, according to which the city of Aarhus wants to become CO2 neutral in the next years. And of course, there are many different approaches, and one of those is the municipal heat transition, with the target of having CO2 neutral or low carbon heat for 90% of Aarhus citizens by the year 2030 approximately. And you see it on the next page. We have some charts to illustrate this. Maybe it's a bit difficult to understand the color coding, so let me help you with distinguishing between the different sources of energy. In today's system, Aarhus is a traditional city, maybe a bit more progressive on average, but today's heat in Aarhus comes traditionally from an incineration plant, waste incineration that produces heat. We have a biomass plant, straw and wood is being burned. We have electric boilers and we have oil. So that is today's energy mix. In the next years, the city of Aarhus is going to change all that. In particular, the share of biomass is to be reduced. Fossil fuels are to be phased out from the system. And there is an investment in new solutions, in particular large-scale heat pumps, several of which will be installed in the city. And what's also quite interesting is that there are two geothermal plants already under construction in Aarhus. And these geothermal facilities will, once they are commissioned, provide heat between 60 and 80 degrees centigrade for up to 36,000 households for citizens in the city of Aarhus. Integrated into the system will be storage facilities for heat for becoming more flexible, and in the midterm, a carbon capture and storage facility is to be integrated with the waste incineration plant in order to reduce emissions even further. And now, taking all this one step further, we can see that related to the city of Aarhus, which I described theoretically, you have a large part of the strategy on a digital basis. So what is to be rolled out across the country in Denmark is digitalization of the district heating system. When it comes to the assessment of leaks, measuring of precise temperatures, temperature going into individual households, measuring which temperature is reached, where exactly, collecting all the data. And of course, the big benefit of such data analyses is that you can improve the planning for lowering the average temperature for the whole system. Currently, we have 70 to 85 degrees on average for the heat network, and in the midterm, this can be reduced to 60 to 70 degrees centigrade. And a fun fact, in Aarhus, there is a private customer bonus payment for return temperatures. That is the heat that leaves your apartment after it has been heated. And the lower the temperature when you return the heat, the better your efficiency inside your private household. So you can pay this bonus to the customers in order to let them know the more efficiently you use the heating, the better for all of us. So you will have a benefit, a tangible benefit, thanks to the bonus. And this takes me already more or less to my conclusions. If people who represent municipalities are listening, I'm sure I'm not the only one here who knows how difficult it is to bring together the stakeholders. Aarhus has a new strategy in place now since last year, new climate plan, and one central goal is to integrate different stakeholders. Maybe I can name just three different bullet points. The Citizen Assembly is one, and they advise on issues of the climate strategy, integrating citizens, private citizens. The second item on my list is businesses and the sector alliances. Sector alliances mean that in the city of Aarhus, there are many individual projects where companies and small businesses are integrated into the climate strategy of the city of Aarhus. So they form an integral part of the strategy. Maybe when it comes to using wastewater, maybe when it comes to using waste heat, I think Arla is, they are producing milk and they are now going to heat pumps in order to increase efficiency. So businesses like these are integrated. And number 3 on my list is focusing on the different municipal authorities of a city like Aarhus. And this is really forcing, in a way, representatives from the public authorities to really make a contribution to these initiatives and to the whole approach. So we really have all the stakeholders on board. Well, that's it for now from me. This is what I wanted to let you know. And here you can find my contact data. I'm happy to answer questions if you have them. And I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. This has been so interesting, and I have so many questions.
It's great to hear what already exists and what is happening in Denmark. Unfortunately, we don't have too much time, but perhaps we can have another discussion at the eWorld trade show so that we can go into more details. But let me ask a question nevertheless. You said that in Denmark, the development of the district heating systems already started in the 1970s. So this is a long time, 50 years of development, and you are now optimizing the system. In Germany, the situation is different. We are only getting started in many areas. Are you optimistic that it won't take us another 50 years until we have great coverage? Well, Anne, I know that the challenges in Germany are very big. So in Denmark, you can only see everything at a small scale, but the solutions are already there. We have a lot of learnings, how you can go for heat planning, how to do heat planning right. And this is also reflected in the system, that it's also attractive from a price point of view. It does work, and perhaps it can give you some momentum. It's only necessary to take courage and to start on this path, to check everything, to do your analyses, and then get started. Being courageous, this is a good buzzword. This is a very good buzzword that I will then pass on to the panel, how courageous people are for the heat energy transition in Germany. Now, thank you very much. And we will now shuffle around a few chairs and we'll come back with a panel discussion with a
Zur Jahrtausendwende war die europäische Energiewirtschaft in einem riesigen Umbruch. Die Messe Essen hat das damit verbundene Potenzial gesehen und das Thema besetzt.
Als Energiemetropole im Herzen Europas haben wir hier in Essen eine besondere Verbindung zur Energiewirtschaft. Unser zentraler Standort und das moderne Messegelände bieten die ideale Infrastruktur für eine Energiefachmesse von internationaler Bedeutung.
Die ConEnergy AG hat seit ihrer Gründung energiewirtschaftliche Fachveranstaltungen organisiert und mit der E-Trade eine erfolgreiche Messe mit stark wachsender Ausstellerzahl etabliert. Um die Veranstaltung weiter voranzubringen, haben wir einen starken Partner gesucht und uns schließlich für die Messe Essen entschieden.
Die E-World hat sich in den letzten 2 Jahrzehnten immer wieder gewandelt. Sie ist nicht nur kontinuierlich in der Fläche gewachsen, sondern auch thematisch vielfältiger geworden.
Inhaltlicher Schwerpunkt der ersten Jahre waren Vertrieb und Handel von Strom und Gas. Doch über die Jahre haben wir das Angebot der Messe stetig ausgebaut. Immer wieder neue Felder erschlossen und Raum für Innovationen geschaffen. Dazu zählt, dass wir bereits früh die Digitalisierung als Schlüsselthema für die Branche erkannt haben und IT-Dienstleister auf die E-World holten.
So gesehen ist die E-World immer ein Spiegel der Branche gewesen und heute in ihrer 25. Ausgabe ist die Messe größer als je zuvor. Sie versammelt über 70 Nationen und deckt die gesamte Branche komplett ab.
Wir werden auch zukünftig die wichtigsten Player der internationalen Energiewelt versammeln und innovativen Ideen eine Bühne bieten.
Gemeinsam haben wir die E-World zur europäischen Leitmesse der Energiewirtschaft gemacht. Im Februar feiern wir die 25. E-World und freuen uns darauf, die Erfolgsgeschichte fortzuführen.
So.
Herzlich willkommen zurück hier in unserem Essener Studio.
Welcome back to our studio here in Essen. I am pleased that you are still with us at the eWorld kickoff. Before the break, we heard how important courage is if you implement heat district networks, but also for the heat transition on site. And we will discuss this question. Before you meet the panelists, however, I would like to welcome the co-host for today's session, and you can already scan the QR code that you can see, and this is the tool where you can ask questions and submit comments regarding the discussion. Please write your questions and then I will hand the questions to the panelists to make sure that all the questions are answered in the time available. A very warm welcome again, and also a warm welcome to my co-host. He knows a lot about the cooperation of various stakeholders in the transition in the heat sector. He is responsible at the German Federation for Energy and Water for the topic of heat transition, and he also has prepared some paper. Welcome, Manuel Schröpfer. It's great to see you here. Mr. Schröpfer, before you came to BDEW, you also studied to be a journalist. Are there any topics where you also feel that you are a journalist doing your everyday work? Yes, of course. I write a lot of texts and reports. And if you write, then it's always about writing in such a way that the reader understands the information, to have a style of writing that is simple and clear to transport the complex topics of the energy industry. And this means that I can also use my journalistic experience in my job today. And this is, of course, also a tool of the journalist to ask questions. And so I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. Perhaps you can invite the panelists. Yes, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for the invitation to host this session. I would like to first present the panelists before we start with the content discussion. The guests are all experts in the energy sector. I'm very happy and pleased about the people joining us. First of all, Sebastian Boley. He is working at the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and he has been working for energy topics since 2011. Thank you very much for being here, Mr. Boley. Mr. Brandt is the Managing Director of the Agency for Renewable Energies, has been working for this agency since 2019, and he really wants to convince people of the energy transition. Welcome to you, Mr. Brandt. Then we've got Mr. Tim Fuchs. He is a councillor at the German Association of Towns and Municipalities since 2012, and since 2004 he has been working in the association already, and he also knows a lot about energy legislation and energy law. A wonderful good morning. And last but not least, Dr. Seifert, who is chairing corporate development at Trianel. You probably all know Trianel. This is a cooperation at municipal level, also working for renewable energies, and Trianel is supporting municipalities and utilities in their tasks. A good morning to you. The topic of the session today is local innovative together. How do municipalities and SMEs shape the energy in the future? The SMEs are under huge competitive pressure, but they also want to invest into efficiency and decarbonization. Many municipalities want to push the energy transition, but have the problem that there are not enough skilled workers, that they don't have enough money, that there are complex bureaucratic obstacles, and the utilities are the central players of the energy transition and transformation, but they are also facing major challenges: investment security, increasing bureaucracy, and strict regulation. Can there be a good cooperation between the different players in order to achieve synergies? Mr. Fuchs, the first question goes to you. How high is the potential of cooperation between the municipalities and the utilities on the one hand and the SMEs on the other hand? And where do we already see examples of successful cooperation? Well, the potential for cooperation between SMEs, utilities, and municipalities is very high. The stakeholders have already shown that they are able to cooperate even before the energy transition, and now for energy transition and the implementation of it, it's important to have a good cooperation. If I say there is already good cooperation, then I would like to just mention 3 examples very briefly, where we already have good cooperation and where it also accelerates the energy transition. First of all, the expansion of renewable energies in the field of photovoltaics. The municipalities own a lot of buildings, and they make available their buildings for utilities to have PV systems there. And the SMEs are installing the systems, are repairing them, and so on. And if you talk about heat transition, then we are now facing the problem that we have to expand the heat networks, and we've got the grid know-how of the utilities and also the know-how of the SMEs, civil engineering and craftsmen. And that are then building the lines and the connections to the individual customers. And last but not least, the extension of the charging infrastructure. And there are also some subsidies in order to make sure that the municipalities and the utilities, as the suppliers of energy, will expand the charge infrastructure, which also needs to be focused on. I said traditionally we always have seen good cooperation between the stakeholders, and I think now in the heat transition this can even improve in order to give benefits to the entire population, because for the heat transition, we have to make sure that the generation and the distribution of heat is decentralized, and the municipalities and the utilities are working on site in order to be a decentral player. And this is a major key in order to find greater acceptance for the heat transition, which is of course costly, which also causes some construction sites and some traffic problems for the population. But if they see that it's also to the benefit of the local industry, that there is value added for the municipalities, this is a major key in order to do things together and make progress together, because you need the acceptance in the population. And I think, and this is something that we also did in the past, we now really have to join forces. We have to work together in the critical phase that we are seeing right now, in the important and relevant phase where the energy transition is recalibrated, so that we also talk to the politicians, tell the politicians that it's up to us, that we are interested in cooperation to the common weal in order to make sure that the lack of activities that we have seen in the past will now be accelerated, and we have a good position vis-à-vis the politicians.
Erleben Sie das auf der Seite der Wirtschaft? Also was sind Ihre Erwartungen an die
Dr.
Kommunen?
Bolay, speaking from the viewpoint of the industry, do you think utilities are partners or rather competitors for industrial players? What do you expect from the municipalities? First, I have to say I agree with what Mr. Fuchs has said. Basically, it will be the local or at least the regional level where the energy transition will be decided in view of the interaction between municipalities and energy suppliers, electricity providers, district heating operators. And of course, this will all grow together and has to be integrated with the local or regional industrial players. I think that is really decisive. Here in Berlin, we are used to focusing on federal politics and the European Union. But of course, real life happens at the local level, and that's why the energy transition actually has to happen at the local, at the municipal level. In my view, as far as I know, we have 79 chambers of industry and commerce in Germany, more than 200 locations, if I remember all the figures correctly. So we have a broad base. And basically that means that we really talk together, in particular against the background of municipal heat planning, which is already underway, and I'm sure we will speak about the details later. So this is already working, even if municipal heat planning is still lagging behind. There is not enough focus, for instance, on process heat. Not enough attention is being paid to questions that should be answered across the boundaries of different infrastructures, like district heating, gas, other fuels. We are not just discussing energy transition. At the same time, there is the changing demography to be taken into account. There are changes in the behavioral patterns of users, of consumers, of citizens. So how can this all be taken into account at the same time? But getting back to your last point, Mr. Schrepfer, cooperation with municipalities and public utilities, as far as I hear from the chambers at the local level, is quite good. The utilities are not competitors. If I ask my colleagues from the Chamber of Crafts and Trades, they might give a different answer, but basically I see there are not many complaints, maybe some confrontation, but basically it's really harmonious.
Steht in erster Linie für Kooperation unter Stadtwerken.
Dr. Seifert, Trianel is really a representative of cooperation between different utilities, public utilities. And how far can you extend that cooperation to small and medium-sized companies? Well, I think the networking at the level of the utilities is very good. Also targeting SMEs and consumers, but looking at your question in specific terms, when we discuss the practical implementation of the energy transition at the local level, the question is, how do you know a cooperation is really good? And I think there are three criteria. It has to be a level playing field. You have to have good preparation and you have to have an intense cooperation. You have to have clear targets at the same time. And the third criterion is to have the right equipment and the right resources in place. You need to have people with the right skills and expertise. So there is not just one kind of cooperation between SMEs, municipalities, and utilities. There are different types, different scenarios. You can select an area where you can be successful, and we see already good examples from practice for the cooperation between municipalities and public utilities. When it comes to digitization, I think of Civitas Connect, which is offering a good example for practical solutions. When you look for the practical implementation of cooperation, you see examples from savings banks, for instance, who really make a commitment. There is the solar factory in Erland as another example. Maybe Trianel is also an example. It's not only about more renewables and more flexibility, but it's also about effectively trading energy. And our approach is to put utilities in a position where they can offer their products to the consumers. And if an SME or a municipality thinks they do not really directly want to go into energy trading or renewables, it's easier to tap into the market via the public utilities instead of cooperating directly. Well, I said at the beginning that the challenges for public utilities are growing. Our association is feeling this directly. So what is your impression? Is there pressure under which the cooperation has to take place? Is there no alternative? Do you feel pressure to consolidate at the level of the energy sector? I think what we see here is, in a way, a slow step-by-step consolidation if cooperation is not sufficient. I think we will all agree, looking at the different current issues, that intensive cooperation is needed, and when this is not done successfully, in particular the small and medium-sized public utilities will not be able to give sufficient answers to the current issues. And then there will be other players in the field, startups and larger energy companies that will offer the products and services in question. So if you want to play in the field, you have to be able to perform as a member of a team of a corporation. Dr. Brand, you accompany many projects implemented by municipalities. Why are some cities and municipalities rather progressive and others rather hesitant? My experience is that it's all about personal commitment. We have many examples where, for instance, the mayor or the climate action officer has triggered a project. We also know of examples where the public utilities really pressed for action, and you have private investors who have PV or wind energy plants, and they look for cooperation with the municipalities. So my experience is that at the local level, you need one person, maybe even a volunteer, who really kicks it off and makes it thrive. I would like to talk about the obstacles in your way, in the way of cooperation and in the way of energy transition projects in general. Dr. Bulay, one focus of the federal government is reducing bureaucracy, and this hasn't really always been successful in the past. One target is to transpose European regulations into German legislation, and this often leads to new obstacles, and rules are even stricter than the EU has really required. That is called gold plating. So where do you see examples for this? Sometimes it's not even gold plating, but rather diamond plating, what you see in Germany. In order to say it very clearly, we conduct a large survey 3 times every year to assess the current situation. About 25,000 companies are taking part. That's the largest survey in the German industry. And we ask what the biggest annoyance is for these companies. And the answer is always bureaucracy. I think I was 98% the last time who named bureaucracy as obstacle number one. And I was almost surprised that it wasn't 100%. And it's multiple choice, by the way. Anyway, looking at the energy sector, currently it is the Energy Efficiency Directive, where all the German rules go massively beyond the European rules. As a consequence, you can, of course, feel that you are a pioneer, but the general managers all tell me, well, Dr. Bulay, my time is now spent filling in forms and registering data. I don't have time left in order to actually work on projects. So the idea that we have to force companies to become climate neutral, I think in the end it's the company that needs to want to be climate neutral for us to reach that target in 2045. And forcing companies, I think, is the wrong way. And we also have another large survey every year, the Energy Barometer, where we survey 3,600 companies. And we ask the companies in that survey, do they have their own climate neutrality targets? 90% said yes, they have targets for the year 2045, and 40% even earlier than that. So that shows us very clearly that the companies themselves want to become climate neutral. So we don't need to force them through red tape, etc., because this is really at the practical level hindering the implementation of reasonable projects. So you think it would be sufficient for companies to do this voluntarily? Well, we have the CO2 prices, no matter whether it's at the large European scale via emissions trading or at SME level. you have very energy intensive industries with many SMEs as well, but we already have legislation in Germany, and this will be transposed to the European level in 2027. For that, let's wait and see whether this actually happens, but that is the current rule that we have, and companies see that pricing for oil and gas is going up, and they feel it when they fill the tank for their car, be it gas or diesel. And if Europe wants to become climate neutral, a reduction for CO2 emissions is our roadmap. And the emissions trading systems have already laid down the rules. So we don't really need to force the companies to do anything to be sustainable. And I'm using the word sustainability now in order to get further and away from energy and paint a bigger picture. Sustainability is what companies themselves want because they are part of the whole system, and it is already playing a big role when they select suppliers, and it plays a big role for staff loyalty, for retention of labor. We have the change of demography, we have the problem of lack of skilled labor, and this problem will increase over the future years. And companies will really have to think about loyalty programs in order to keep their staff on board. And we see this all the time with DIHK because we are always asked what we are doing. We have the standardized certification, which we can always, of course, use as a proof. And this is getting more and more important. So you think it's the market that is driving things forward and their own interest? Exactly. Dr. Seifert, it's more or less the same for public utilities, right? They have more and more reporting duties. There are federal authorities that ask for data. What do you think currently are the biggest regulatory and bureaucratic hindrances that make it difficult for utilities? And on the other hand, do you think there are opportunities where the energy industry and the players themselves might arrive at more efficient or speedier procedures? Well, first, I'm speaking about the side of the energy companies and utilities. I think the main point here is the implementation of the energy transition, and that requires consistent digitization, because if we want more renewables, more green heat, this will be necessary. Also for balancing purposes, looking at input and output. And we will also need to be able to trade 24/7. We need dynamic tariffs. We need dynamic and flexible incentives for consumption to be rendered more flexible. And this cannot just be done with a paper pad and a ball pen or an Excel spreadsheet. So these processes have to be able to evolve and be developed further independently. As an energy company, we can also make a contribution to efficiencies with renewables, for instance, with sustainable consumers, to be more practically implemented at the local level. But of course, this requires hard work, it needs time, and it restricts us. So it is really a plethora of individual rules that we have to live with that are also interrelated, that make things difficult. So you cannot just take away one of the rules and then solve a problem or make things easier. It is really a network of different rules and factors and requirements, reporting duties when it comes to sustainability, a need for approval if you want to build a new facility, a new plant, restrictions that come from the municipal administrative level, justification that is needed for projects that work with green heat, for instance. This is asking too much, not just of SMEs, it's sometimes also asking too much of large-scale corporations, and this is in the way of many projects.
Mr. Fuchs, talking about approvals, the experience with the municipal approval authorities are quite diverse, and very often there is criticism saying that the processes are too slow, too bureaucratic. Do the bureaucratic procedures really slow down projects? What is your opinion? I think you have to take a very specific look at the different areas. Sometimes things are not as you wish. If you, for example, take a look at the expansion of wind turbines onshore, then these things have improved compared to 2 to 3 years ago. But you also have to understand the authorities a little bit, and this is my role very often, because onshore wind energy is normally approved by the districts, and the municipalities are always under great financial pressure. It's not easy to just employ new people, but this means that the processes become more complex, but there are fewer people to handle them. And this is a problem. This also is coming back to your point of overregulation and new requirements and regulation coming up. My famous example is the EEG, the Renewable Energies Act, which started out with a few sections and now has 101 sections. And I love section 48, which describes what is necessary for solar plants in 3 pages. And this is something that is not for approval, but for the tariff. But it shows that you need more and more people in order to handle all these regulations. And the new government has already recognized this problem, and they want to change things. And for example, regarding the Geothermal Taxation Act, there will be changes, and we think that we need more efficient processes in many areas. But if you talk about bureaucracy and the reduction of red tape, you also have to be honest. And this is my appeal to the stakeholders in the debate. If you listen to the politicians, the reduction of red tape is a topic that is supported by everybody, but you have to make sure that it's not only paying lip service, but that you can also see where concrete things can be done. I would like to give you 2 or 3 examples. The expansion of charging stations. We've got a state program, a state aid program, especially for SMUs, the SMEs, the filling stations that can build new charging stations with state funding, and that can also improve normal charging stations to fast charging stations. Then suddenly it's more difficult. You cannot get the same subsidies because it's no longer in line with the original approval, and they have to pay back some of the money they received. So it's not the municipality, but it's the federal state which is asking for the money back. And another example, well, I also travel a lot around here in Germany, and if there are domestic guests in hotels, it's no longer required to fill in registration forms, but I still see it in many hotels, although it's no longer required. And this means that red tape is reduced, but the small and medium-sized enterprises have not recognized this yet, have not implemented this yet. Okay, the changes were as of the 1st of January 2025, and we have many smaller businesses. For them, it's difficult to keep track of all the changes in legislation. And the hotels also have to register this information to other institutions. So it's all very, very complex, and there are many things that can be changed, and you have to take a close look at what should best be done.
Herr Dr. Brandt, was sind aus Sicht der
Dr.
AE
Brandt,
die zentralen strukturellen
what
Hürden
are
beim Ausbau
the
der
central
erneuerbaren
structural
Energien? Oder umgekehrt,
obstacles
was braucht es aus
regarding the
Ihrer
expansion of
Ansicht
renewable
aus für eine
energies from your point
funktionierende
of view? Or the
Projektkultur?
other way around, what do you need in order to have a functioning project culture? Thank you very much for this question. I also would like to come back briefly to the topic of red tape. Well, it depends a little bit. I would not say that we need less bureaucracy, but we need good bureaucracy. I had the opportunity to talk to somebody from the Chancellor's office, and I met him and discussed about bureaucracy. And the next morning, I woke up and had some problems with my health because there was something wrong with the meal we had together because the hygienic conditions were not met. So sometimes red tape is required, but sometimes it's a little bit too much. And now I would like to come back to what Mr. Fuchs also implied. We need more trust. We need good framework conditions, but we also need trust. And we also heard the example of Aarhus. Of Aarhus. This is what is shown by Denmark. If the population, if the municipalities, if the state and the companies work together in a trustful cooperation, everything will be easier. But now let me talk about your question. Very often we have discussions around the land that is required and what needs to be done. But I think we have come to a point, and this is also reflected in this panel, that we have all understood that we have to move forward regarding renewable energies, and young people also support this. These are the people who know that they will experience climate change in their further life, and they are highly motivated to do something. And I think we can pull down barriers together. I do not want to go into the details. It can be discussed in a deep dive, but cooperation is required. But what is also required from our perspective is the idea of regional value generation, and the SMEs and the utilities and the municipalities can work together here because it's happening on site and it needs to be seen and felt on site. So if people see, okay, now I've got working bus lines and good energy supply, then this is also good for the economy and they will accept it.
Herr Dr. Bohler, Sie hatten ja selbst den Ihren
Dr.
Energiewendebarometer
Bolai,
angesprochen, der
you
jedes Jahr
already
vor allen Dingen
mentioned
um das
the
Thema
energy transition
Wettbewerbsfähigkeit.
barometer,
Und
and this is mainly focusing on the
einer der
topic
Ergebnisse ist,
of
dass von
competitiveness.
jedem
And one of
dritten
the
Betrieb hat
results
die
shown
Energiewende
is that
negative
1 out of
Folgen.
3 companies
Welche
say that
konkreten
the
Faktoren
energy
im Kontext der
transition has
Energiewende
negative impacts
bedrohen
on
denn
them.
Wettbewerbsfähigkeit
What
aus
are
Ihrer
the
Sicht?
concrete factors
Da
that
müssen wir
you
uns,
would
glaube ich, erstmal drüber
like to
unterhalten,
mention
was wir
here?
denn unter
Well,
Energiewende
first of
konkret
all, we have
verstehen.
to
Und ich bin mir ziemlich
find a
sicher, dass
definition
jedes
of the
dieser
energy
3600
transition here.
Unternehmen,
And
die
I
sich da
think that
beteiligt haben,
all the
wahrscheinlich ein bisschen was anderes
3,600
darunter verstehen.
companies
Das ist
answering
aktuell
the
neben dem Frust
questionnaire
über die
have a different
Bürokratie, den ich ja
definition.
gerade
Yes,
genannt
of
habe, da
course,
sind
they
ja
are
auch
all
eine breite
frustrated
Mithilfe aus
because
dem
of
Energiebereich.
red tape
Da
and
kommt man eher
bureaucracy, but it's
generell,
not
aber hier
only
nur
the
jeweils
energy
über
sector
Stichwort Nachhaltigkeit. Auch von
increasing
Lieferketten
bureaucracy,
über
but also
Umweltauflagen eben bis hin zu
sustainability,
Sachen wie
supply
Energieeffizienzgesetz,
chains,
Preiswert.
environmental
Hat
regulations,
das
and
natürlich
so
vor allem
on.
mit den
And
Energiepreisen
here
zu tun.
this also has something to do with energy prices. The energy prices are not necessarily driven by the energy transition, but as the gas prices increased, it's not due to the energy transition, but this is due to the Russian attack on the Ukraine. But I think many companies don't make this difference and say, I have to pay more for gas because of the energy transition. So here the question is a little bit difficult. But on the other hand, it doesn't really matter why prices rise, but they have to deal with the fact that the prices are rising. For electricity, we always had high prices in Germany. For gas, it was more or less okay in the past for most of the industries. And so looking at the industrial structure today in Germany, we are a gas-based society and not a nuclear-based society such as France. To now say that we can achieve the energy transition based on electrification is an easy solution because it's relatively easy to have solar energy on the roofs and wind energy in the landscape. But this also means that it's difficult because we are using so much gas, not only in the industry, but mainly in the industry. So for us, regarding our national economy, it's twice as difficult as for other countries because we are not an electricity country, but a gas-based country. This is a major problem, and the companies do not have an option right now if they are quite energy intensive. Where do you want to invest? If I talk about a classical SME using 10 gigawatt hours of electricity and 20 gigawatt hours of gas, where do they have to invest? They already know that electricity is expensive, that they are paying higher prices than their competitors, and now they see that gas is also much more expensive than a few years ago. Do they want to electrify their plants? First, they have to go to the grid operator, and the grid operator might say, yes, you can do this, but we can't connect you at present. You can come back in 10 years' time. So it's over. And what should they do? Hydrogen? Yes, perhaps sometime in the future. CCS? Probably the plants are much too small for this. This will not be affordable. And so they don't have an option. And the costs are high already. And if the costs are high, then you might say, okay, perhaps in 10 years' time, this might change. Well, this is difficult because the costs in the energy intensive industries are simply too high. And this is something that we can see every single day. We see in the press that many small and medium-sized enterprises do not necessarily directly close their businesses, but this is not happening too often. But new investment will not happen in Germany, but will go abroad. In Monday, I had a discussion in North Rhine-Westphalia, and one of the CEOs of an SME told me, Mr. Boley, I now invested 70 million into a site in Germany, and I feel stupid that I did this. And this is the current atmosphere, and this can summarize all this very well. And we have to be extremely careful not to lose too much of our industrial structure in Germany. The industrial structure, well, we are a regional country with many different regions. This is good and right, but this means that we have different conditions, and in the regions, you also have good jobs, and in the industry you earn 20% more than in the service sector, and this means that the industry is important for this country, and we have to be concerned about the current developments. So what I'm hearing is that you are not really happy with the political attempts to lower energy prices. Well, what they have done so far is a good first step, but it will not be sufficient for many of the companies in our country.
Den Begriff Akzeptanz
You
erwähnt, Herr
just
Referent.
mentioned acceptance. Dr. Brandt, I already mentioned that AEE is trying to convince people of the energy transition, and you also publish a survey every year. It's the acceptance survey, and 80% of the people interviewed think that the further expansion of renewable energies is important or very important. But if you now compare this to the barometer of Dr. Boley, do you think there is the gap between the acceptance in society on the one hand and the economic realities on the other hand, which no longer fit together? Or what do you think about it?
No, of course, I understand, as Sebastian said, that enterprises have to explain about their challenges, but we also have to be honest when it comes to long-term investment. We have to invest in the right areas. We have to make sure that our industry remains future compatible. And of course, in other regions of the world, it will be easier to produce hydrogen than in Germany. So let's remain honest here, but that's why it's even more important. And Sebastian, that's what I heard you say as well, that we support those branches of the industry that make the right decisions to that effect. And regarding our background, the acceptance survey is done via a neutral panel, so nobody knows actually who is asking the questions, and this is a high value, more than 80% of acceptance for infrastructural projects the last time. But if you look at this in specific terms, not just across Germany, we ask, do you really have an actual contact with such plans? And when they say yes, we see that there we get a higher average of acceptance. So if you know already what you're dealing with, it seems to be easier to accept it, like accepting a wind farm because you feel that the wind energy is something you benefit from. The lower prices are what you benefit from. So I think these are the important factors we have to keep in mind. And let's be quite honest, and it has been mentioned before as well, we've always been importing a lot. You said Germany was a gas country. Yes, that's true. We really benefited from internationally being provided with oil and gas at cheap prices. But it's not just for ecological reasons that we want to exit from that. We also have learned that not every contract is a secure one, and things do not always work. This is a historic building in Hoyerswerda. And when we have a virtual meeting with colleagues from Ukraine, they are really telling us that they have quite different problems from what we are discussing here. So in the long run, I think people will feel that there are challenges. We will all feel that it's necessary to make investments, and we will maybe not be able to keep the level of wealth that we have now, but we can offer our children perspectives. And I think that is an important factor that we've also learned a lot about with our delegation over the past 2 days. What is important right now? Is it important for us to be able to offer our children a future perspective, or is it important to have cheap gas for my car today? Of course, it's easy for me to answer that. I want to answer the question on behalf of my children, but I'm sure that many will give the same answer. And step by step, many in our society will agree. We just have to actually make the steps and trust people to make the right steps as well. Sorry for being a bit pathetic. Mr. Fuchs, I think at the beginning of August, the German Federation of Cities and Municipalities has published a press release on a collapse of the municipal budgets and a threatening spiral of indebtedness. So there is a lot of pressure on the budgets. At the same time, investments are necessary for transformation-related tasks. So is it an option here? It should be an option to increase utilities equity through the municipalities, or maybe it's another option to reduce the distribution paid to the municipality. How can this field of tension be tackled? As you said, it is a field of tension, and we don't really have a solution. But we need to talk about it. In spite of the tension, how can we make investments that are necessary altogether for the energy transition? These are astronomical figures, 1.2 billion euros. I think that is the total that is envisaged for the energy transition, not just heat, but in general. On the other hand, you have quoted quite correctly the ever-increasing indebtedness of municipalities and the delay when it comes to investments. It's not just about new projects, new construction. It's about maintaining roads and kindergarten buildings and schools so that these infrastructure elements can be useful. As you said, we have different possibilities in order to finance the energy transition. We can, if you have profits made at the utilities level, give further support via the shareholders. This is, of course, getting more difficult because of the increasingly difficult financial situation of the municipalities. So you could bring equity into play. And some statements have been made to that effect in the coalition agreement. There is what they call the Deutschland Fund, the Germany Fund, the other associations, and we are ready for financing the energy and heat transition to use an energy fund. And we think that the federal government and the federal states will create something like that. And there are already some subsidies in place and some incentive programs in place. And I think there will be even more. And we can imagine that there are other elements to incentivize further investment in public utilities so that there will be more equity. This has been a long-standing debate at our association because it is not easy for a public authority, in particular when you look at private investors, for utilities, for municipalities. This leads to fears. This leads to worries. Remember the debates we had about deregulation and privatization of municipalities, utilities of the municipal building cooperatives, for instance. So this is not an easy debate, but it has to be put into relative terms. If you include private investors for projects, for utilities, you need controllability, you need a majority of shares to remain in the public hands so that you can exert control and you reach the necessary acceptance among the citizens. I hope that for the federal government, there will be enough drive and enough motivation to push this forwards. I don't know how we should do this without them. And private investments would definitely give us more margin of maneuver. Dr. Seifert, another aspect of financing are obstacles. Many do want to invest in generation plants, for instance, but can this currently be beneficial? Against this background, is there enough security for planning? When you look at the order of events when it comes to investing in a typical public utility, you see that there is first the distribution network for power, for electricity, and then there is green heat, and number 3 is renewables and more flexibility. And often there is even a fourth issue somewhere from the area of daily services that the municipality maybe needs more buses for their transport network or whatever. So that is a regulatory framework that needs to be in place that orders the priorities over a longer period of time. When you look at the level of the actual utility, as Tim Fuchs explained, you have traditional possibilities for leverage, and this will be limited rather quickly by the regulatory framework, and not all the investments will come at the same time. And investments in the distribution networks for electricity will maybe be paid back 25 to 40 years later. When it comes to green heat, the same period is realistic, and maybe for renewables it's a bit shorter. It's 18 to 25, the payback period. So it's a lot of money that is paid out at the same time. So if you need external capital, you will also need guarantees and some kind of collateral or security that has to be different from traditional leveraging. And there is also something else, which is the retention of profits that you have to tackle, even if this is really difficult for municipalities and cities, or you need to include private equity. There is something else I would like to briefly touch upon. That's the monitoring report regarding the energy transition as published on Monday this week. There are many individual aspects that are interesting, and I would like to pick out one of them, that is the expected electricity demand till the year 2030. In the monitoring report, the expectations were corrected. 57 terawatt hours were corrected up to 75 to 750 were corrected downwards to 600 to 650 terawatt hours. So what do you believe? Well, I think once we have reached 2030, it will no longer be even 600, but rather 500 something. But that is my personal estimate. So obviously the 750 will not be realistic, but this range of 600 to 700, others say 530, others say 800. So we have so many different studies. Some go beyond the 750 terawatt hours. So that shows what a big dilemma this is. The energy transition was started off with the idea of being able to do it all. And now 2030 is not so far away, and we have a very limited corridor. And 15% is not really little. So being able to do it all, to plan it all, to schedule the energy transition is something that is maybe not so easy. Also, because we are discussing a restructuring of our infrastructure systems, not just for power, not just for the electricity grid. It's infrastructure in general. Mr. Fuchs has mentioned that we also need infrastructure in other areas, not just in the energy sector. And this has all to happen in parallel, and this makes it expensive. And at the same time, we have this bureaucratic jungle when it comes to getting permits and approvals. And this is not happening as quickly as politicians might have wished for. And as we heard, historically speaking, we are a gas country, not an electricity country. And that is then what happens at the end. So you politically reach what's happening in real life. Another question for Dr. Seifert. 80% renewables till 2030. That's the target according to the Federal Ministry for the Economy. And Ms. Reiche, this is to remain the target, but will there be some impact on further expanding the network of renewables? because the forecast was lowered in the report, and at the same time we have a lot of electrification of transport, of heat. So how does this go together in your eyes? Maybe Dr. Seifert can be the first to answer this one.
Can only share my personal opinion. I also think it's realistic that by 2030 we'll rather be at the lower end of the demand. So 600 terawatt hours might be realistic from my point of view. And this is also due to some delays and the difficulties in the economic development right now. We, of course, all would like to see economic recovery very fast and with more electric mobility, more heat pumps. But at present, I think it's just a reality we have to face. And we already discussed about all the investments that we are expecting right now. It, of course, helps if you have more time to prepare these investments and to do these investments. And it would be bad if you now make the investments very painfully and then the assets will not be fully utilized. So we have to take a realistic view of the situation. If 80% is achieved for for a lower total, it's easier to achieve, but still 80% is an ambitious goal to have this expansion, and this requires also a lot of efforts on the part of all of us. Mr. Brandt, what is your view? Well, we are not an association. We are an information agency, so we don't have an opinion, an official opinion. This is more for the other associations to say. But as Mr. Seifert said, if he now slow down, it will make things a little bit difficult. We are, of course, in constant exchange with our citizens, and I think we should not underestimate that there might be some exponential developments in the field of heat pumps or electric mobility. I heard that in the year 2021, 2022 in China, the share of electric mobility was only 5%, and now it's 50%. So it can expand very quickly. And last week we had some discussions where we had a lot of discussions, especially with older people, and they said, okay, now I have understood if the CO2 price is rising and the costs are rising, and we have this transition from a gas country to an electricity country, we'll have to do something. And then it will become more expensive, and I will perhaps then invest into a heat pump if I see that the amortization time of a heat pump it's between 13 and 17 years. So I would not underestimate this development, but Sebastian, I also understand what you said, that this is also linked to the development in the industry, and we have to be sure that we get improvements for the industry soon so that they are not relocating their industries outside of Germany. So it's very difficult, and it's not good if you step on the accelerator and slow down and do it over and over again. This is not good for a car, not good for the economy, and we have to just be aware of the fact that we need the grids, we need the storages, and we need support for this. And I think then we can manage. Mr. Fuchs, we are short of time, but nevertheless, I also would like to hear your opinion, or your personal or the view of your association. Well, first of all, my personal view. I think here, regarding the report, we have to come back to the statement that projections and predictions are always difficult if they affect the future. Well, we always said that we want to achieve this by 2030, and this was important. What we need urgently, we are an association, and I can also give a political statement here. What we really need is reliability. We have to stop the back and forth. Heat transition is a local topic, so we are affected very strongly. We need clear framework conditions concerning the Buildings Act. We need clear framework conditions regarding the onshore wind expansion. The statements that we heard in the meantime that the current models will be questioned again and that perhaps the expansion of wind in southern Germany will not be affordable any longer don't help the associations who also talked to the citizens. If things change too much and it said what you planned might not come true without having a real good concept, it's very difficult. And for us, it's important that based on the monitoring report, we very quickly see a situation where we've got clear legislation, reliable legislation in order to prepare the right framework conditions for SMEs and for utilities and municipalities.
Ja, vielen Dank. Das war eine Punktlandung. Wir sind am Ende
Okay,
des
thank you very much. This
gelangt.
leads us to the end of
bedanke mich
our
bei Ihnen für das
discussion
spannende
today. I would
Gespräch
like to thank you very much for this
sehr
exciting
interessant auf jeden Fall. Wir
discussion.
haben viele Themen
I thought it
besprochen
was very
und
interesting. We
damit gebe ich
could
an Frau Voss
tap
gerne
into
weiter.
many different aspects, and now I hand
Von
back
meiner
to
Seite
Ms.
herzlichen
Bors.
Dank. Das war
Well, I
sehr
also would
spannend,
like
die
to say
Analysen
a big
zu
thank
hören.
you to all of
Herr
you.
Schröpfer,
It
vielleicht als
was great to listen to
Abschlussfrage auch
you.
die Frage nach Ihrer
And Mr.
persönlichen Meinung
Schröpfer,
oder auch
now
Präferenz
my
für
final
die Idee,
question goes to you. What
dass
is
man
your
sich so ein
personal
bisschen
opinion or
eingebürgert am
the
Ende.
opinion of
Wir haben jetzt ganz
BDEW?
viele Anforderungen
We heard
und
so
Wünsche
many
gehört an einen
wishes and
Ordnungsrahmen, dass er vor allem
expectations
verlässlich sein soll,
regarding the
aber auch wirklich sehr
regulatory
verlässlich ist.
framework,
Das ist ja nicht
especially that it
viel
has
zu
to
tun.
be
Jetzt
reliable.
ist auch von der
And to make it
Bundesregierung eine
reliable,
Herbstreform
efforts are
angekündigt.
required. Now the
Und wir
federal
sehen
government
viel
announced
an richtigen
an
Schritten.
autumn of changes. Do you think
Was
we
wir als
see
BDW immer
enough
sagen und worauf es,
steps
glaube ich,
in
auch
the right
ankommt, ist, dass
direction?
die
Well,
Politik
what our
sich
association always
mit
says
der Wirtschaft und
is
der
that
Branche
politicians
austauschen,
have to
weil bei
properly
vielen Sachen, die sind
exchange with
vielleicht
the
politisch
industry
gut
and
gemeint,
with the
aber am
economy. Many
Ende
things might be
ist
right
die
from the point
wirtschaftliche
of view of
Realität oftmals eine andere.
politicians,
Also ich
but
denke,
the industrial
ich bin da schon
reality might be
optimistisch,
different.
dass es
I am
gelingen wird,
quite
dass was auf die Beine
optimistic
gestellt wird,
that
aber ich glaube,
it will
damit auch das
succeed, that
Stichwort
things
Bürokratie
will
aber auch wirklich
change.
was
But
spürbar
coming back
ankommt.
to red tape, in order to make
Früher
sure
war
that
immer,
people
oder bis
feel
vor
this,
wenigen
a lot
Monaten
is
war die
required.
Devise, viel
Until a
hilft
few
viel.
months ago,
Und ich glaube,
people
man muss
said
auch schon
a lot
gucken,
will help a lot.
dass
But
man
now
einen
I think you
spürbaren
also have
Bürokratieabbau
to make sure that
hinkriegt.
you
Das heißt,
have
welche Regelungen
a reduction of red
schaffen
tape
da den
that
meisten
is
Aufwand und
felt by
welche
people. So you have
schaffen
to
eben die
take a
meiste
look
Entlastung, wenn ich
at
die eben
what will
ausregle. Insofern,
make
ich
life
bin vorsichtig
easier
optimistisch.
for the companies
Das sind doch
fast. So
gute
I'm
Schlussworte.
optimistic, even
Dann
if
sind
a
wir
little bit
gespannt. Ich bin sehr
hesitant.
gespannt, was wir über den Herbst
Okay,
sehen
thank you very
und welchen
much. And
Stand wir
I
dann
am
auf
now
der
looking
E-World im
forward to the
Februar besprechen
developments
können.
in
Sehr, sehr
autumn and
bemerkenswert.
winter
Freue mich
and the
dort wieder zu sehen.
situation when we
Bis
meet
dahin, Herr
again
Schröpfer,
at the
ganz herzlichen
E-World
Dank
in
für die
February. I
wunderbaren
hope that
Informationen
we'll
und dass Sie
meet
sich
each
das
other. Mr.
durchgehalten
Schäfer,
haben.
thank you very much
Vielen
for
Dank an
being the
unsere
host for this great
Gäste.
discussion.
Herr
Thank you
Seifert,
very much
Herr
to the
Schröpfer
other
und
guests,
Herr
Mr.
Referent, dass Sie
Seifert,
da unerwartet
Mr.
da sein
Fuchs, Mr.
konnten
Boley, Mr.
und
Brunt.
mit uns Ihre
It was
Eindrücke und
great to have you
Anregungen
here.
geteilt haben, die Ihre jeweiligen
And it was
Themen mitbringen
great
an
of you to
Entwicklung
share
der
your
ja,
views
Regulierungsrahmen.
regarding
Haben wir alles
your
deutlich gehört.
perspectives of future
Auch
regulation.
vielen Dank an die
And
Menschen
also a
hinter den
big thank
Kulissen, die
you
das Ganze
to the
gemöglich
people
gemacht
who
haben.
worked
Das ist
behind the
einmal das
scenes.
eWorld-Team.
This is
Das
first of all
sind
the eWorld
Livestream
team.
Techniker
These are the
und
two live
ein
stream
Webstream.
technicians and our two
Das hat
interpreters.
toll geklappt wieder, das eWorld
It all
Kickoff.
worked
Freut
very
mich sehr.
well. We had a great
Von
eWorld
Terminen am
kickoff,
gemeinsamen
and
funktioniert.
I am
Ja, das
happy that
war's
we've got
mit
a
dem
well-functioning
eWorld
team here.
Kickoff. Aber ich glaube, wir sehen
Thank you
uns
very
alle bald
much
wieder. Ich habe
for
es
the
gerade schon
eWorld
gesagt,
kickoff, but I
nächstes Jahr im
hope
Februar.
that we
10.
will
bis
meet
12.
again next
Ich
year
werde auf
in
jeden Fall vor Ort
February,
sein
the
und ich hoffe,
10th
dass
to
wir
the
uns dann
12th
da
of
wiedersehen.
February, and
Dann
I
können wir
will
auch gemeinsam
definitely be
Geburtstag
there, and
feiern.
I hope to
eWorld
meet
wird
you there, and then we
25.
can celebrate our
Das
birthday.
ein
eWorld
Vierteljahrhundert
will
und
be
wir trinken
25
gerade auf das
years,
nächste,
a
weil
quarter
so
of a
viele Tage
century,
beseelt
and
werden.
we
Ja,
will
besorgen Sie sich
drink
also
to the
gerne
next
jetzt schon Ihr eWorld
quarter of a
Membership Ticket.
century.
Der
So
Ticketshop ist
please
online
get your
und
ticket. Now the ticket shop is online, and we also have some digital program, and you can find possibilities to register in the eWorld community. I look forward to meeting you soon, and I would like to thank you very much.